We're ready to rock and roll, yeah? I'm Perry from futureofcleaning.com, and I'm here with Harrison, my son, and we own Future of Cleaning, and we develop the Reach It range and a whole lot of other products that are coming real soon. And what we wanted to do was share with you the latest product that we've got, which is called Precision, which is a dynamic stiffening system and a really, really stiff and rigid water-fed pole. And we wanted to explain how it came about and also to sort of divulge the history of the Reach It poles, you know, where they came from and how we started and all that sort of thing. So we're presenting this as both a podcast, which you'll find on Reach It Radio on iTunes, and also if you look for Back to the Future of Reach It on YouTube, then you'll be able to see this as a visual representation of what we're talking about. Some of the things we want to talk about, the reason we wanted to make it a video, even though it's sort of kind of chatty, just me and Harrison talking, is because to try and describe Precision and how it fits inside a Pro kind of needs a drawing, but we're going to do our best to articulate it. So if you're on a podcast and listening to it on Reach It Radio, then you may want to zip through to the part that you want on YouTube and get an idea for it. So let's go. We'll clean this off and we'll start. What I wanted to do, Harry, we've never really told the whole story about Reach It, where it came from. The logo we know came from you when you were 16. Yep. So that was pretty cool. And everything which you see to do with Future of Cleaning, Reach It, Wash It, Constructor Brush coming out, Tube Runner, Air, what else have we got coming?
Precision, which is what
Precision, yeah. And anyway, all of the media is all done by Harrison. This is his university. He sort of came and joined with me in China at 17 years old. So we started this business 4 years ago yesterday. Yeah. That's what it was, and really? 19th, or maybe 4 years ago today. Anyway, the registration of futureofcleaning.com, you could see it. So here we are, and we're really excited that we've got the next development of the Reach It poles. But in order to explain Precision, Harry and I were sort of going over the script and saying, well, how do we explain Precision? And you can't really understand Precision unless you first understand Reach It. So we thought we should explain the whole story. So there was a time where I used to sell Excel poles, which are made in Europe, and we used to have them imported into Australia, and we'd sell them, and we'd sell, basically, if you think about this, a good customer, and it's still the case today, and you know, many of the people in Australia do the same thing. You have a 5-story opportunity back then. Like now, you know, we can go to 7 and even 8 stories, but if we're talking back in 2009, like I started in this business in 2006. I went to the British Window Academy with Craig Morlam and studied water-fed poles and visited the Ionic factory and all that sort of stuff. So back in those days, we had mostly fiberglass poles. The very beginning of carbon fiber poles was coming out. And so 5 stories was a big reach for a water-fed pole. Yeah, I remember. And so we would sell a 1-story pole. We'd actually sell a little handle as well for glass fences, which we're just about to reintroduce, by the way. There's little training wheels. You know, because we're bringing out Constructor Brush, one of the things about Constructor Brush that's so dynamic and so customizable, but so different to anything that's ever happened before, I think that the only way you can really understand it, how to set it up, is to be able to see it. So then I realized this.
Yeah, at eye height.
At eye height, like we say nose to the glass, right? Okay. So you're here and you should be able to hold it here and see it and say, is that what I want it to be? Is it got the flow that I want? Has it got the bristles that I want, the configuration that I want? And what if I changed it? How would it look? So, so we're just about to reintroduce this handle, but that's by the by. So we would have a customer and have a 1-story pole and a 2-story pole and a 3-story pole and a 4-story pole and a 5-story pole. So you go 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. And you can see that's 5, 5, and 5 equals 15. Did you notice that? 5, 5, and 5. I didn't notice. That's 15 stories of carbon fiber poles. And we used to sell a pack of 5 poles, so we had a little ground pole. So we would sell this pack here for $14.95. And It was a big seller, and we did a lot of business with it, but each pole had a brush. Yep. Each pole had a tube sitting internal. Yep. And then in the back of we ran with vans and trailers, but the trailer was, the best design because we designed it from scratch. So we would have all of our poles in our trailer like that, and we'd have hooks in the trailer like that, and we had the hoses and the brushes obviously coming out this side, towards the back. So we'd be able to pull a pole and pull its tube and pull its brush. And we did a lot of commercial work, schools, universities, and business parks. And then one day it worked on me that, hang on, when somebody buys 5 poles off us, then they get 15 stories of composite, whether it's carbon fiber or fiberglass. So we've got 15 stories, and I'm going, but they're going to do 5 stories and they get 15 stories. And then what's really bothering me is that this pole here would sell for $2,500 back then, which is, more than less than a, you could buy a 7-story solution from us for the same sort of money now, and much better and much lighter. But the point is that brush there for $2,500 was only cleaning that there. Yeah. Yeah. So you're paying $2,500
just to clean one floor.
Yeah, to clean one floor of a building, and it could be a great big building. That's not very good perspective. But you think, okay, that you've got 20% of the building there, 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 and 20% of the building there, right? Now the rule, everything Reach It, everything Constructor, everything that we do is built around the 80-20 rule, which is the rule of business. So you go, there goes 80% of my business is, 40 or even 80% of this building is 4 stories and below, and 20% of my building is 5 stories. So without spending this $2,500, I can do 80% of that building. And if you actually expand the customer base and you say, well, actually, I've only got a few 5-story buildings, they only account for 10% of my business. Then if that's all, you've got 20% of that building and that accounts for 10% of that business. That means it's only 2% of the total glass area that you clean that is actually at 5 stories. But you have to pay $2,500 to be able to reach.
Yeah, but just for that extra 10 feet.
For an extra 10 feet, yeah. So that's the thing. You've got 4 stories of pole and you want the 5th story, and you have to buy the 4 stories again to get the extra 10 feet. You've got to pay $2,500 for it, and it cleans 2% of the glass area of your business. Yeah? So it's only cleaning 2% of the total glass area. So I was looking at all of this and going, apart from that, the environmental footprint is crazy, that you have to get 15 stories worth of carbon fiber in order to do 5 stories worth of work. And it all started to dawn on me that this is really crazy design and that we should have something which is a combination of telescopic and modular, because at the time the Unger high flow was around, which was a modular pole. Modular just basically means you push the pieces together. Gardner have a modular system, Unger had a modular system.
Yeah, like single section pieces.
Single sections, join them together and get to your brush at the top, and the water will flow up the inside of it. But you need a cricket bag or a softball bag or a great big sports bag in order to hold all these pieces. So it's cumbersome. And anyway, there's a whole lot of reasons why modular hasn't really been successful. So the vast majority of people were committed to telescopic poles because they compacted really easily. And what was our idea was to make what we called modular-scopic. When we lodged our patent on just saying that we'd registered our ideas first so we could say, hey, we thought of this. We thought about modular-scopic. So how do you combine telescopic and modular? And so we realized that we could bunch 2 sections together, and that would be the equivalent of 1 floor, right? That's 11 feet or 3.3 meters, something like that. So each story of a building is 11 feet. We made our 2 sections together so they're 11 feet at a time. So as you clean down the building, you have a 5-story pole. You take off the bottom 11 feet, you have a 4-story pole. You take off the bottom 11 feet, you have a 3-story pole. You take off the bottom 11 feet. you have a 2-story pole and you take off the bottom 11 feet, and you have a single section to be able to clean the building with.
Yeah, and also that they collapse telescopically, so when you finish the job, you put them all back together as a telescopic pole, and when you start the job, you're just extending a telescopic pole. So
Correct. You get all the benefits of a telescopic pole, but you're actually making it now. So then, at the same time, you know, Gardner were releasing Superlight, you know, sort of making the pole lighter and lighter, but still keeping it as a single system, pretty much. And so, you know, you'd have a Superlight pole there, and a Superlight pole there, and a Superlight pole here. And so our logic was, well, this pole gets lighter by dismantling it as you come down, and that's the reach it logic.
Well, and just to like reiterate is that when you wanted to clean that extra story, you just added the same type of logic.
Well, that's what we're getting to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we haven't really said that yet. So we got to the point that the longest telescopic pole that we could make, if I clean all that off there, the longest telescopic pole that we could make was 4 stories.
That was still usable.
That was still usable. Why?
Right. Because of the section height with the clamps. in
Clamp
the
height,
reach.
right. You've been trained well. Grasshopper. What was also around at the time were poles that were 2.4 meters long. 2.4. 2 meters is 6'6". And so they're about, I'm guessing, 8 foot 6 inches, something like that long, or 2.4 meters long. And so you'd get these pole sections, and then you'd have them telescopically, so there'd be another one, another one, another one. But the average guy is like, you know, 5'8", yeah? And so at his reach, he can reach, you know, 7'6" or something like that. But he can't reach these clamps.
Yeah, so you'd have to put it all, bend them over, and then
Extend the pole on the ground. And so this is how everybody did it in those days. They would extend a pole on the ground, and what was called footing the pole. They would have a guy, sometimes you'd have a guy running up the middle from the end of the pole and running it up from the middle to get it off the ground. But some of the guys, you know, the big burly boys,
it's like a circus act.
they can like lift it up like this, and huge core, huge risk. You know, nobody got hurt, of course, but you know, you can feel the OH&S risk of that. I mean, those days you don't really hear of that anymore. Although I did see somebody in America doing it with a Reach It Mini the other day. That was funny in Oregon. So here you go. These clamps are out of reach. So we said, okay, the maximum length that we can make a pole section.
Is the top clamp is still within reach.
The top clamp has to be in reach and an extension. All right, he has to be able to reach. So I'm down here. He's got to be able to reach the clamp and extend somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now let me jump because I'll probably never come back to this. What's amazing about the Reach It Mini is that it has a short handle length. Right? One, it's 100% carbon fiber and amazingly rigid. But the second one is that it has a short handle length, which is 4 foot or less than 4 foot. So the clamps are down here, and you open a clamp and you make one extension, and you can fully extend in one movement. I'm a big boy, but in one movement I can fully extend each section, as compared to the Reach It Pro and other, like all of the younger range and everything. The guy is here, even if he's tall. The clamps are here, so then you've got 1.5 inches for every clamp, you know, on top of the 6 foot section. So he's here, and then when he wants to put the pole up, he has to go.
Yeah, so about like 2-3 feet at a time.
No, less, maybe 1 foot at a time. And if you're really short, I mean, I have some very short customers who don't even have a Reach It Pro because they can't even reach on our pole, right? But that's the very, very short guys. But no, you're talking, even for me, is like 1 foot at a time. Right, because the Reach It is like 7'2" as a compact pole. So if you're a guy who's a foot shorter than me, which is I'm 6'6", so he's 5'6", then he can't actually, you know, he can only, the first part of the pole he'll have to put up on the ground like that. But we made the executive decision that the length of each section will be 6 foot. Yeah. And then if you've got 6 foot, then you add your clamps on top, and then you can push the pole up. And then obviously the further down the pole you get,
the closer the clamps are to you.
Yeah, therefore the more action you can do. But you can never put out a whole section of a Pro, for example. So that's why we made the maximum length of a Reach It Pro section 6 feet. We've then got to face the next issue is the grip of the human hand, right? So you've got a thumb, and 4 fingers. I wish I got you here for this, right? And a hand, right? That's a little finger.
That's
That doesn't look like
that's 6 fingers.
Oh, is it? Is that what went wrong? That's okay, so we'll take away 1 finger and half of another finger, so you get this idea that that's a hand.
That looks right.
Okay, so now we're going to say the average Caucasian hand should be not touching. When overlap means you're over gripping, touching you're still gripping, and then slightly open you have the perfect squeeze, what's called a squeeze grip. It's not a bucket grip, that's quite different. If it's a bucket grip, like you'll see on the power and control handles, we use a bucket grip instead of a squeeze grip, and the bucket grip is from the days when we're at monkeys and apes, right? So you can see that.
That means you just don't have to use your thumb to hold it.
Correct, you're just using your fingers. He's done his research on bucket grip. So the ideal diameter of the human hand, according to the Harvard studies, and we can send it to you if you write to me, perrytate@me.com, and I'll send you the Harvard study, is the ideal for the Caucasian human hand is 2 inches, right? And the range for the squeeze grip, and the range is 1.5 to 2, but the ideal is 2 inches, 50 millimeters, right? 47 to 50 millimeters. So we looked at that and said, okay, well, therefore the maximum number of tube sections that we can create is 7, because we need the 8th one for something else. And so our 7th one is around 46 millimeters, like 1.5 inches, and the 8th one is around much more than 1.5 inches, and the 8th one is 49 millimeters, which is 2 inches, right? So our section number 8 is 2 inches. Our section number 7 is 46 point something, so let's say 47. And so then we are then in a design situation that you have 6-foot sections times 7 equals 42 feet. So each Reacher Pro has 42 feet of carbon fiber. And then in order to maximize the rigidity of the pole, each section, because it's telescopic, has to have an overlap, right? So you can see me just circling there where the overlap is. And in the Reach It design, whatever, we use an 8-inch overlap. Some of the other companies use a 6-inch overlap. So we could make the Pro longer, but we sacrifice its rigidity for the sake of 6 clamps times 2 inches, 1 foot. Yep, so we end up with a 6 times 8. Anyway, it ends up at something, I think it's a 39-foot pole, stretched out on the ground. We could make it a 40-foot pole if we wanted to, but we lose some of the qualities that we wanted, which was called rigidity. Yeah, make sense?
That's the whole point. If you're cleaning up to 4 stories, you're going to want a rigid pole.
Yeah,
There's no
rigidity.
point in being a floppy pole at height. You just don't get any accuracy. You work too hard all day.
You got it. And let me find this wiping spray. And if you go to powerandcontrol.com with a hyphen on either side of the word and, so powerandcontrol.com, if you go there, you'll see all the videos and studies that we did with Dr. Douglas J. Mills, where he is also studied, both chemistry, physics, and the human body, and he's a licensed doctor in the state of Texas, America. And he was also director of occupational health at one of the largest occupational health clinics in America in Fort Hood, Texas. And he helped us really understand some of our some of our concerns and some of our thoughts and feelings that we were having intuitively about, using water-fed poles and how safe they were for repetitive motion and things like that. And one of the things that he really pointed out was that the definition of work is force through movement, force through distance.
Which really means, for a water-fed pole user, is that if the pole is more floppy when you're working it,
you need to make more work.
Yes.
Yeah, it takes you more work. So if you've got a cheap floppy pole and an expensive rigid pole, the corny angle is that you would actually pay for the difference in food, because it would take more effort. When a pole, we digress a little bit, more calories that as that pole flexes, if you imagine, for example, a piece of wire and you go and you bend it rapidly and it gets hot, right? So flex is when energy is lost in heat, or the energy that's lost in flex is lost as heat. But on a water-fed pole, you can never see it heat up because it's got so much surface area. But if you have a pole where you're starting here and you're pushing this way, you're asking your brush to go that way, and your pole goes from here to here to here to here, and then it starts to straighten up again. So you get this great big flex. You're putting all this effort in that way, and it's transferring that way. Whereas if you have a rigid pole, and I feel for the reach it radio guys, if you have a reach it pole, you can move your arms up and down in this direction and you will actually get a direct translation in that direction. But if you move horizontally, your brush will move vertically with much less loss of energy.
Okay, so what Perry drew there for the guys on the reach it radio is he drew a diagram of a guy working a pole against a building maybe about 3 stories up, looks like from the height of the guy. And he's going, when the guy works the pole towards the building, he's going in a horizontal force. He's expecting the pole to move vertically. So the pole's going to bend. The more horizontal force and the rigidity of the pole, how flexible the pole is, the more it'll bend. And so it's going to bend with the force horizontally to move vertically.
Yes.
Make sense?
Yeah, he's actually accelerating. I mean, I learned all this from Doug, right? He's actually accelerating. In other words, if you have a floppy pole and you move slowly, you won't experience as much flex as if you go like this and a really fast jerk, right? If you have a really fast movement forward, you'll see the pole go, right? And that work is lost in the flex. And then after that, you'll see it go, and the brush will go vertically upwards, isn't it? So it's quite fascinating. So I know where we're heading with this. Somewhere. We made, it's about rigidity. We made the Reach It Pro as rigid as we could because we understood from being window cleaners how essential it is, like from a feeling point of view of efficiency and effectiveness as a window cleaner, that you have a really rigid pole, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. So now we come back to our 5-story building, yeah? Okay, so we have the ability to go to 7 stories or 8 stories, let's say. And so we had a Reach It Pro that we now understand is designed as a 4-story pole. Incredibly, I just had to colour that in a bit. So I turned it into a Scotsman.
Yeah. Or a lady.
Or a lady.
Women can think 4 stories.
I put one line in the wrong place, too many. The torso was extended a little bit longer than it should have been, right? For my little stick figure. Okay, so we have a 4-story pole. We know it's telescopic. We know you can dismantle it 1 story at a time. So the same pole can be used for 3, 2, 1 and ground, and balustrades and pool fencing and things like that. So the one pole cleans all. Yeah, so you say, here's my maximum height. Now, in the logic was, now that we have this telescopic pole, we need to be able to push this telescopic pole up 10 feet at a time. And that's the foundation thinking of why we started Reach It. Yeah? Yeah. So we understood that we could take, this is section 1, here's 2, 3, here's 4, 5, these pull apart like that, and then 6, 7. The 7th section has a 47 millimeter OD. We add to it a pole skin because carbon fiber conducts electricity. So we added a neoprene and lycra pole skin, which then creates an insulating surface, on the assumption that there's no water.
Yeah, so it doesn't conduct electricity. There's no water on the pole skin. Yeah. But it also, like the diameter of the handle, that's what Perry's explaining, is that we put a neoprene cover over the handle, so now that the handle's back up to 2 inches.
Correct.
Which is the optimum handle size for a squeeze grip for a...
Boom! You got it. All right. So Now we want to say, okay, we want to clean level 5, so we take with a Reach It Pro. So let's change the color so we can go over the top of that. So we've got our Reach It Pro in red, yeah? And we need to be able to raise it, so we take black and we say we need to add 11 feet to that to go up 1 story. And that's what we called the Reach It XT.
Instead of having just an 11-foot single section to raise it, we made it 2 sections. So it's a telescopic modular extension.
And it's inverted. So it's an upside down telescopic 2-part telescopic pole, something like that. Right. So it's now an 8/7. So when we talked about before having a section 8, we'd saved it, and now because the bottom of the Reach It Pro is a section 7, we can put the section 8 over it with a section 7 inside it, and then pull the section 7 out. And that's what the XT does. And because they are also 6-foot sections, and we have an 8-inch overlap on the inside of it, then you have effectively, 11 foot 4 inches. We say 11 feet, but it's an 11 foot 4 inch extension.
Which simply is just an extra floor when you're cleaning with a Reach It Pro. So
and,
it's now 5 floors.
And that, like in the current climate, is $399 US, as compared to the old climate, and there are still companies still pushing for this.
If you buy a 5-story pole, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean now a 5-story pole might be $2,000, whatever, but with a Reach It XT, it's $399.
You extend your 4-story pole to 5 stories.
Yes, it'll only cost you $399, and you can buy it after you've won the contract to clean a 5th story. And you can take your Reach It XT to 6 stories by adding a second XT, so you have one XT and a second XT, and you can take your Reach It Pro to 7 stories. I just don't want to get my red pen dirty there, by adding an XT to the XT to the XT. So you've now got 34 feet of reach added to the 39 feet of Reach It Pro, so you can get up to a 75-foot reach, including the operator, right? Because the pole doesn't touch the ground, it's operating from the waist height of the guy. So you normally add 3 feet to the total sum length. So that's the Reach It design, but it gets better, because the Reach It Pro, we talked about having the long handle sections, 6 foot, that's a 7'2" compact pole, short extensions, cumbersome, awkward, and horrible to use in residential environments. So the other thing, when we came to China to develop Reach It, the other thing which I was passionate about was making a short-handled pole. There was none available at the time. And so, can you see across to here? Yeah. Okay, so let's put a little 2-story house.
And this is a tangent, by the way. This is...
No, it's a mild tangent because it's about talking about the XT and the functionality of it. Because we made the Reach It Mini, again, in this case, it's a 7-section, so it's the same 7 sections, right? This is 100% carbon fiber for the Reach It Mini, and the Reach It Pro and the Reach It XT are both 100% what's called high modulus carbon fiber. Now, high modulus basically means it's got more rigidity for the weight, more strength for the weight, right? So because the Reach It Pro's got to go up to 75 feet, because it's being pushed up by the XTs, then it's got to be high modulus, and the XTs are pushing it up, so they have to be high modulus. But on the other side, the Reach It Mini was only going to 2 stories, so it could be 100% carbon fiber. So it's a 25-foot actual length 7-story pole that pulls apart and creates a 12-foot pole, so you can take 12 feet out, again the same logic, 1 story at a time.
You clean the 2nd story and you clean the 1st ground story.
And it's also got a little 4-foot pole, again for glass balustrades, pool fencing, and also, if you have a look at our heavy-duty gooseneck...
screens, by the way.
Yeah, true. And then we've got the heavy-duty gooseneck can go on here. If I just put it, with a shadow of red. That's the top of the water-fed pole. I'm not a very good drawer. So that if the heavy-duty gooseneck goes on there, you can take the number 1 section out of your Reach It Mini or your Reach It Pro and add it for 5 or 7 feet horizontal reach.
Where are we going with this?
No, I'm just saying that that's the design of the Mini and the Pro, because this is the history, right? So we've got the number 1 section pulling out of all of the poles, and we've got a 25-foot pole. Now, what we realize is that some of the people who clean residential also either have falling landscape, which means that a 2-story pole is now 3-story, or they do strata, residential apartments, so they get 4-story strata buildings. Or sometimes you're doing prestigious homes and you find out that the tenant that you're cleaning his beautiful home actually owns a commercial building down the road which is 4 stories, and he says, can you clean that building? So we realize there's a large percentage of window cleaners around the world, and especially also in the small country cities, you know, where the number of buildings over 4 stories is really limited, that they also want to be able to extend their 2-story pole, which is doing 80% of their customers. Yeah, the Reach It Mini is designed for an 80-20 rule of a 2 stories. And then they can take that very same Reach It XT and put it under a Mini and take the Mini to 3 stories and put 2 Reach It XTs under a Mini and take it to 4 stories. So that's our history about the Reach It Pro, the Reach It Mini, and the Reach It XT. So if you have a commercial business and you have a Reach It Pro for your commercial work and you have a Reach It Mini for your residential work, you add 1 XT, your Pro can go to 5 stories, but the same XT can take your Mini to 3 stories. You have 2 XTs, your Pro can go to 6 stories, and the same 2 XTs could take a Mini to 4 stories, thereby giving you a 4-story Mini and a 4-story Pro. Yeah, so that's actually, before we made this video and before we introduced precision, that is exactly what our business looked like and what our design is, why people buy Reach It poles. And then we go on to precision. What do you think so far?
Pretty good.
You can talk away. Your turn to say whatever.
That's pretty good. I got a little bit confused at the gooseneck part, but I understand it now.
Okay, so what was I... If you just sort of, you know, because you're good at doing executive summaries, so while I'm wiping the board.
It's because you're explaining the Mini.
Right.
And then...
I kind of jumped out of the Mini.
You jumped over...
Pulled the top section out.
Right, pulled the top section out.
Said, look at this.
Got explained. I didn't have like a segue over to why you're explaining the Mini.
Ah, and why I'd gone on to goosenecks.
Right, like instead of going, okay, sometimes you need this much reach, you've got to go climb over obstacles.
True.
And we've designed the Mini to, it's also modular, not just for itself, but for the gooseneck as well.
That's true, because the early Minis didn't pull apart that way. So now, when we introduced the heavy-duty gooseneck and we realized that we could give people this 5 and 6 foot horizontal reach, because we're using 100% carbon fiber poles, then we redesigned the Mini and said, no, we'll let you take out that number 1 section. Yeah? Let's segue to this podcast and video to tell you...
It's been a long podcast.
It has. But there's a lot of history, and we've done real good.
Well, I'm thinking that we could chop it up later and just have like little small bits.
If people ask for small bits, I think people will listen. So, let's go on to precision. And if we talk about bias, can you explain what a bias is?
Okay, so to my understanding, so I'm not an expert, but to my understanding, a bias is when you favor something because of a belief or considered understanding.
Right.
So, carbon fiber, like water-fed poles are telescopic. Therefore, if a pole is not telescopic, it is not a water-fed pole. Or, actually, no, I'm going to use a better example. A water-fed pole has the tube internal.
Yes.
Because that's what a water-fed pole is.
Yes.
If you feed the water-fed tube on external, but the water's still going to the brush, is it still a water-fed pole? And a lot of people go, no, it's not a water-fed pole, it's not a professional water-fed pole.
Or it doesn't look professional, or it isn't professional.
Because the tube's on the outside. But...
It's only a bias.
The bias is that the tube has to be on the inside, but a water-fed pole is defined by feeding water to the brush. So
a bias is something where you have a belief system that's leaning you one way or another way, but you're actually leaning that way. Now you are inclined to make all your decisions based on that. It's interesting you talk about internal versus external, because we're just releasing Tube Runner on all reach-it poles. Completely, all of our developments, maybe bar one, are retrofittable. Even the way we design precision is very important to talk about retrofitting. We don't want the people that have supported us and helped us become successful, we don't want them to feel as if they have to buy a new pole from us in order to get the benefits of what we're thinking. So every time we're developing anything, the first thought we're saying is, how do we make this available to all of the people that have ever supported us and bought our products, as compared to making it available for the general market, or by saying, oh, we already have loyalty, so let's get more money out of these people, you know, by making them buy the new product and, you know, whatever.
Like a completely new system. No, we just want them to buy the little...
Especially because carbon fiber should last forever, right? It's not a disposable product. You see other manufacturers have got products that are breaking down rapidly, you know, 1 to 2 years, replacing poles and things like that. But the Boeing Dreamliner is made out of carbon fiber. Like, it is not being made out of carbon fiber because in 2 years' time they need to replace it. It's made out of carbon fiber because it can last for a really, really long time.
Yeah, and we're under a firm belief here at Reach It that we like the cars from like the 60s or the 70s. There's cars that are still around today, not the cars that are 5 years old that you got to go replace.
Yeah,
practically.
Yeah, like so they call it built-in obsolescence. We try and build out obsolescence, and we haven't been perfect at it. But when somebody shows us that we've got a problem, you know, we've always tried to build out what the weakness is. However, on the other side, we also recognize that when you've got two moving parts, there has to be one that wears in order to protect another from wearing. So you'll see that some manufacturers wear their carbon fiber tubes and glue the clamps on so that they become integral. So there's the wearing and the tearing is kind of like, oh, I need a new one. Whereas what we do is we bolt our clamps on so that you can replace them, and the clamps are designed to be softer than the carbon fiber so that, yes, they do fail, but they are like $69 a set, including delivery, for a $1,500 or a $2,000 pole. Yeah, you know,
so if the clamp breaks on, let's say,
or it just wears, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have to replace the section or cut the section shorter so it gets shorter and shorter the more times it breaks, instead of replacing the clamp. So that's a whole logic about, you know, built-in obsolescence, built-out obsolescence, the consumerism versus the German style of just pure quality. And that's what we've tried to follow. And Apple, by the way, like the great American company, does not subscribe to built-in obsolescence. An iPhone that's 3 years old, a MacBook Pro that's 4 years old, 5 years old is still working amazingly well, and they update the software so that you feel that every year, you know, when you put in, what did we just put in, Yosemite? Yeah. You know, you get a whole new computer, or you put in iOS 8, you got a whole new phone. Or was iOS 7 was the one which was really amazing, wasn't it? Yeah. You know, so we subscribe to that kind of thinking. Those are the companies that we model ourselves on.
And that's effectively our bias. Our bias is to make products that last a long time, that get better as you use them, rather than getting older as you use them, and to upgrade them when we develop new things.
Yeah, so preserve the thing that's going to last a long time and replace all the things around it. And if we can improve them, we replace those things with improved versions so that they get a better experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so here was the bias. We made a telescopic pole, and albeit we made it modular, we still in our minds had a bias that it was a telescopic pole.
Yeah.
And so in order to raise that telescopic pole higher, we needed to put the 10 feet underneath it, which was the XT. So that was another bias. So we have to push that pole up. So we used 8.7 XT, then put another 8.7 XT, and put another 8.7 XT underneath it, and we just pushed the pole up. And that's how, for the last 4 years, we've reached 75 feet. The problem with it is this. The Reach It Pro at 4 stories is incredibly and perfectly rigid.
And let me point out, that's how much percent of the building that you're cleaning?
Maybe half.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a 7-story building. So it's perfectly rigid at 4 stories. A Reach It Pro with 1xt is flexing slightly at the 3-4. So if we look at it on the side, this is the analysis that we did.
And it doesn't exactly bend like that. Right?
Okay.
It's
got a much more gentle, but you know it's there. There's an apex, right? So you know there's an apex. Then, for the guys that go to 6 stories, yeah, so the guys on Reach It Radio are going to have to handle this, but basically the pole is going to come down like this, and then there's 2xt. So it's flexing more. It's completely manageable, but it's flexing more, and so you kind of, the angle of the top number 1 section when it's close to the glass is much closer to parallel to the glass. It's not parallel until it gets to 7, but it's much closer to that. And the apex is somewhere here. So you can see the rigidity of the...
Perry's right now, he's drawing a diagram of the poles just as a line. And as they grow up each story, he's putting a little bit more bend in them and trying to mimic what happens in real life.
Yeah, exactly.
And the apex is where the bend is kind of like in the middle of the bend, where it's bending the most. And so he's pointing out that the bend is at like the 3-4 sections. Is that right?
3-4 at 5 stories you start to see it at 3-4, and at 6 stories you see it at 4-5, somewhere like that. 3-4-5, you see it somewhere in the number 4 section. And then if we go to 7 stories, then you've basically got the brush on the glass, and the pole, the number 1 section is vertical to the glass, and then it comes out. Now, there's a couple of things which, you know, can make this really unfair. The test of a water-fed pole is not being straight under the building. So I'm going to go to the other side of the building here and just say, if you took a Reach It Pro and you stood 6 feet away from the building, yeah, and you had a Reach It Pro, it'll look rigid.
Yeah, well, essentially what we're trying to do here is to understand that, like myth busting, the photos online at 75 feet of poles, when they go, oh, it's super rigid, but they're like 6 feet away from the building.
Yeah, so you've got the poles almost straight up. So anything is going to be light and simple and straightforward if it's straight up. So Reach It Pro, any other pole, straight close to the building. The problem is that you don't get much force or pressure for the bristles of the glass, for the bristles of the brush to push against the glass on that. And then if you look at the building, when you look at our videos, you'll see that in actual fact what we have is a space and then a garden bed here. So we can't get any closer in some places to 20 feet, in other places to 25 feet away from the building. So we're way back here. Now the further back you go, the more gravity is going to pull on this pole and flex it, as compared to when you're here, the weight of the pole is bearing down, straight down through the pole. Like that's the definition of it when it's vertical. So you're at 6 feet away from the building, the weight of the pole is going to bear down straight down the pole. So it won't flex.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start to move away from the building, then all of a sudden...
Which you do in real life.
Yeah,
when you're working it, if you're going to judge a pole and its rigidity at height, you really need to see the pole working.
Yeah, where you're...
Situations.
Well, there's all sorts of other things. When you're working here, where you're 6 feet away from the building and your pole is 6 and 7 stories high, your upward gaze, right, if that's your nose, right, and that's your body's, your upward gaze is practically 90 degrees. There's no way the body is designed for that, right? So now some of the guys are using ballet glasses, which is cool, but the point is that your upward gaze...
Just prisms at the bottom of the glasses, that it's kind of like a periscope, except it just look straight up.
Yeah, you're looking through a prism and then you're actually looking up. So there's definitely some developments with ballet glasses, but you can see that the angle of the upward gaze is unhealthy there. So what the operator tries to do is get himself as far away from the building as possible so that his gaze is within the normal range of movement of the neck.
Yeah, so essentially we're talking about the further you can stand away from the building and still have a rigid pole, the better for your neck.
The better for your neck. The rigidity gives you better efficiency, the better control over the pole. Like it's completely better, better, better in every sense of the word without being ridiculously away. You know, you want to be at sort of 80 to sort of 70 to 80 degrees, you know, with your pole.
Which is why when we decided to invent or make precision, is because at 75 feet, the Reach It Pro with 3 XTs wasn't to the rigidity that we think it needs to be.
Yeah.
Even though at 6 stories or at 5 stories, it's amazing. Everyone loves it. We wanted to up our game a little bit.
Yep. So when we started in the business, we were selling fiberglass poles, and then carbon fiber came out, but nobody could afford it. So we were making hybrid poles. We were mixing carbon fiber and fiberglass, and then 100% carbon fiber became affordable. Then high modulus carbon fiber became affordable. So this is the progression of the industry for all of us who are manufacturers. And then just recently, ultra high modulus carbon fiber has become within reach. And there's another level of carbon fiber that's completely out of reach. It's like 9 times the price again, which is, you know, over time as it becomes more used will come down, down, down in price, and then ultimately even that level of carbon fiber, you know, MSI or rigidity, sort of strength to weight features will become available, and there'll be even another development. But right now the best that we can do is you know, what is coined as ultra high modulus,
which is still in a price bracket that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
And the Reach It Pro is high modulus. Now that's rigid.
Yeah.
But you need something that's ultra high modulus to do 75 feet and it be still.
If you're going to do it a lot of work, you don't need it because we've been doing it for 4 years with the XTs, but you're going to get a benefit from making the pole more rigid. And what we saw, and we didn't want to make an ultra high modulus pole and say to everybody, you must now buy an ultra high modulus pole in order to get these benefits. So what we looked at, we've always looked at the Reach It Pro and the behavior and where that apex is of flex. And then we've looked at and studied and talked about how do we make a stiffening kit. Like we thought about putting a rod up the inside of the pole across these areas, you know, where that apex is, and just pulling them back out. And we looked at, we used to have a 1989 Land Cruiser, Lucy, remember? Yeah. Lucy the Land Cruiser, it was our holiday car, we go 4-wheel driving. But her springs had sagged, right?
Her springs were very loose.
They were.
Lucy.
They sagged. So we bought a stiffening kit, you know, for it, which is a great big spring or 2 springs, you know, leaves that you sort of bolted in, and then it just, you know, gave those springs back some life and lifted up the suspension. So we looked at stiffening kits. We looked at the idea of, again, if we made something, we could put something on a clamp here and something on a clamp here and make it really tight so that when this went to flex, it wouldn't be able to, it would just pull tight.
It's like, what is it, like a splint? Like that?
Yeah, I guess you'd call it a splint. You'd bind it there, and then it would be rigid. So we looked at everything about how to do it. And then we realized that we had a bias, right? And the bias was that we had a telescopic pole that we were pushing up, but we'd forgotten that we also had a modular pole, that we'd developed a moduloscopic system. And so we had section 1, and then we had section 2 and 3. And actually, because we can pull the pole apart, then we could put what would effectively be an XT in between the 3 and the 4. So that is what we call precision A. So you can see it coming, right?
And that's ultra high modulus.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it stiffens it up.
So if somebody's just going to go to 5 stories and they want the Pro to be really rigid, instead of buying an XT, they could buy a Precision A, and they could take out that apex, which is the 3-4. So you'd have, the Pro would have section 1, then you'd have section 2-3, then you'd have the Precision is going to be a 4-3, yeah, like that, and then you can join your Reach It Pro again is your 4-5. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in the middle of 3 and 4 is a inverted 2-part telescopic pole, which was our original brainwave, whatever, innovation, you know, which formed the XT.
Well, and essentially what we're trying to do here is we go, what if we took away where it bent the most? What if we put something that was so much more rigid that it brought the rigidity back into the pole?
All right, so here we are. We've introduced, the purpose of Precision was to put something into the middle of the Pro that stiffened up its apex, wherever the flex was. And the flex was moving at 4 stories. Reacher Pro 4 telescopic pole has no flex of any noticeable amount, except when you accelerate, of course. At level 5, it has a little bit of flex at the 3-4 section, and then at level 6, the flex is sort of the weight. And what was causing it was the XTs are, because they're an 8-7, they're like this round and they're heavier. So the more XT we add, these are, let's say, around 2.5 pounds each. Yeah. So they're coming out at this angle, like when you're a long way away from the building, they're coming out at this angle, and then the Pro is having to do this, like flex up, right, and adjust with that weight. So we're adding weight to the bottom of the pole in order to push it up. Now, obviously, if we go really close to the building, you won't feel any of that. It'll be completely rigid. But what we're talking about is the reality is that sometimes you can't be close to the building, and the further away you get, the more flex you're going to see in a pole. So what we did is we said, okay, well, if we put a 4.3 ultra-high modulus insert into the Reach It Pro, we can take out, and we have taken out, that apex. So the Reach It Pro 4 with a Precision A works beautifully. When we put 2 Precision A's in, right, so we ended up with 4.3, 4.3, we noticed that this is starting to flex again. Not as much, but it's starting to flex again. So then we thought, well, what if we made a Precision B? So an A, yeah, just so you can see it, I'm writing Precision A and Precision B. Precision A is a 4.3 and Precision B is a 6.5. So now we can put a stiffening kit in between 4 and 3 on a 5-story pole, and then you could buy a Precision B to go to 6 stories, and you'll put a stiffening kit in between 3 and 4 and another one between 5 and 6. That's pretty cool, because then anybody wanting to take any Reach It Pro 4 up to 5, 6 or 7 stories can start to add, you know, either like to go to 7 stories, 2 Precision Bs and 1 Precision A is the right solution.
And effectively, when you're carrying it to the site, you're still only carrying a Reach It Pro, and what's like is 2 XT. So you're not,
yeah, there's no more things to carry.
You don't have to have a golf bag in order to do it.
No, and what's amazing is that in grams, this is like 1,250 grams, this is 700 grams, and this is 800 grams. So the 2 of these together is, you know, just a little bit more than 1 XT. So not only are we making it more rigid, but we're making it lighter. So let's start talking about, you know, the next development. If I jump onto the other side, I think I will, for time's sake, and say, well, now that we have Precision A and Precision B and the ultra-high modulus carbon fiber, what if somebody wanted an ultra-high modulus carbon fiber pole? Like they had the money and they had the customers and they had the workload, and then they wanted to go to 75 or 85 feet. The answer is yes.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. So what we made is what's called a, that pen doesn't work there, a precision adapter. And what it does is take the place of the Reach It Pro with just very short half-meter sections. Half-meter is 18-inch sections.
It scales down between the sections, going from from section 3 down, so 3, 2, and 1, all in one piece.
Yeah, so you got
So you can connect to the normal brush with your normal adapters.
got your brush there. We could put a big constructor brush, because constructor brush goes out to 24 inches.
And you can connect to a Precision A.
There's a little adapter which is sections 1, 2, and 3, and they're 18 inches with 9-inch overlap. So that's not very big at all. Then we put a Precision A, which is 11 feet 4 inches. Then we put another Precision A. We already know this is the right maths, which is another 11 feet 4 inches. And then another adapter to replace the 4.5 of the Pro. So I've got a little one in there, which is, you know, section 4 and 5. But again, it's only each section is 1800, so each section is 18 inches and then overlapping 9 inches, so you don't see very much of it. And then you go to precision B, so you can go 11 foot 4 inches there, 11 foot 4 inches there, and you can really just add as many of these as you want. Now, if you only had 2 of each, you can still bring in here your Pro handle, which is a 6/7, because the last thing at the bottom of this is actually a 5. Yeah. So you don't, you can even still use the Pro 6/7 as the last piece if you wanted to.
Yeah, and this is essentially, if you wanted it to be completely rigid as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
This is the setup.
That is called 100% precision, and the reason, not only is it 100% ultra high modulus carbon fiber, the whole thing is built out of 100%. The point is that you have this incredibly rigid, as rigid a pole as is possible in the marketplace, right? You have a completely rigid pole that means that as you make effort, it will do what you ask. So you actually have like 100% precision at the glass as much as 100% precision A and B. Yeah? So does that explain it?
Well, we can run some video.
We could, yeah.
We've already tested it, we've already videoed it all, so we can actually cut to that video.
We had Chris and Alex from WCR over here in China, so we showed them. We've got our test videos, and then I'm hoping we might be able to flick a little bit in from one of our customers which has got the prototypes. So that'd be pretty cool.
I reckon that's the best way to explain it. Show them what it's actually like in comparison to.
Yeah.
With the XTs.
And then let me put a little advert in here, because by the time you see this, the constructor brush will be released. Yeah. So you go to www.constructor-brush.com. Get out of my way, he says. Harry's giving me hand signals even though he's got a microphone. Here we go. So constructorbrush.com, and you'll see that we have 12-inch, 16-inch, 20-inch, 24-inch, and 36-inch water-fed brushes with complete versatility. So you can change exactly what it is, what kind of bristles, what kind of flow, and it's pretty amazing. So if you are a serious water-fed poler and you want to clean above 50 feet,
if you made it this far down the video or podcast,
you're a serious water-fed poler, right? So precision, if you want to say to anybody what's precision about, it is completely dedicated and focused to cleaning above 50 feet. The Reach It Pro didn't need any modification, didn't need any changes. So it's the XT that we've addressed, not the Pro or the no, but it's the XT that we've addressed. If you think about the actual thing that we've addressed. Now, if somebody's already got XTs, the reason I wanted to share is that those XTs can still be used with a Mini. So even if you don't have a Mini, you buy one Mini for $699, you already have 2 XTs, you have another 4-story pole for $699. Yeah? So it's not that anything will go to waste. We don't want waste, do we? Efficiency. And then think as much as you can, is my only tip for business. Think as much as you can about the 80-20 rule in your business. It really, really helps you focus and understand where to spend your money, what's happening in your business, who are your staff, where's your money coming from, who are your customers, which ones are looking after you, who's the payers, who's not. Like basically everything fits into the 80-20 rule, so it's really worth putting a bit of study in, and everything. If you do like Reach It, which we know if you're here right now in this podcast, then you must like Reach It, then everything about Reach It is processed through the 80-20 rule, and the same with Wash It, and then a bunch of other things that are coming out. All right, must be time to sign off, do you think, Harry?
Yep.
That's goodbye from me.
All right, bye from me.
Okay, cheers.